Welcome to Whistleblower Network News, Whistleblower of the Week. And I'll tell you, I am so excited today to have on these twin titans of the whistleblower world. This is monumental, this meeting of these incredible whistleblower titans. I'm just excited. We have Georgina Halford-Hall, who is the Chief Executive, Whistleblowers UK. She is the founding member of Whistleblower UK and is a whistleblower herself. So that's quite exciting. I'm an associate member of her group, Whistleblowers UK, and they are making stunning news on the world front because they're pressing forward with Whistleblower Awareness Week coming up on March 20th through the 24th. And they have on their website a petition asking Parliament to pass a bill for Office of the Whistleblower. This is just creative, mind-blowing what they're doing over there in the UK. So they are pressing forward for the role of whistleblowing with the Office of Whistleblower. It's a big deal. And then we have Stephen Kohn, who has written 8 books. He has a new one coming out on whistleblowing called Rules for Whistleblowers, a handbook for doing what's right. He is known as the actual titan of whistleblower, not only in the United States, but the world. This is so exciting to have the two of you on. Of course, Stephen is the founder of the National Whistleblower Center. Both Whistleblower UK and the National Whistleblower Center are nonprofit institutions. Stephen has established National Whistleblower Day. He was involved in the Dodd-Frank Act, the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, and the Whistleblower Protection Act. So he has been around. I am proud to call these two giants in the whistleblower community here on Whistleblower of the Week. And let's start with Georgina, because you have this big conference coming up. And tell us what's happening over there in the UK.
Well, first of all, good afternoon from England, and thank you so much indeed, Jane, for inviting me back to talk about the important movements forward in the UK. Whistleblowing Awareness Week is the very first of its time. We've never done it, so it might feel like we're playing catch up with you guys, but do remember we were the ones who introduced whistleblowing law first, albeit several centuries ago, and we've made it international from day one because, frankly, as I think I've said in the past to you, I believe very much that we are a global community now. We're no longer individual countries, like organizations. We cross boundaries. People work all around the world. They live all around the world. So it's about aligning. And we want to dispel the stigma, because whistleblowers are really professional people. They may be tenacious, and at times they may experience trauma in their lives that perhaps makes them different to how people remember them before, but they do come back. And the trauma is brought about because of their determination to expose wrongdoing, whether it's abuse, whether it's fraud, whether it's other forms of crime. That's what they're trying to achieve. And what we're here to do is celebrate that and destigmatize some of the really unreasonable labels that have been attributed to whistleblowers, no matter where they are. And I'm so delighted and I'm excited that we have got so many parliamentarians who have come on board with this and will be participating in Whistleblowing Awareness Week at a time when across the world, we're facing multiple different challenges, from conflict in Europe, a potential global financial crash again on the horizon. And all that's going to do is bring forward more and more whistleblowers, because nobody can say that somebody doesn't know about it. And there's always lots of somebodies. They may not have joined together, but they're out there. And we are raising awareness, as you are in the States, to ensure that all of those people have somewhere to go to, and that information is brought together so it can be investigated by those who have the statutory powers to be able to do so. And for us, it's going to be the Office of the Whistleblower and the Whistleblowing Bill. I suppose I better give Steve some opportunity to come in, because while we're going to be talking to him a lot next week, it's his day too.
I heard that Steve is heading over to England to join you in this process. That is really exciting. Steve, tell us what's going on here. You're going to cross over the ocean, across the pond, to join with your fellow Titan here. Tell us what's going on.
Well, sure. The bill that they're gaining momentum and support, and Georgina and her organization is doing an incredible job. It will establish an office of the whistleblower with some significant powers. What we learned in the United States is that such an office is instrumental. The SEC, U.S. Securities Exchange Commission, established an office with a good website, guarantees for confidentiality, anonymity. They've totally attacked non-disclosure agreements. They've created a welcome opportunity, a welcome home for whistleblowers to come to. And they have flocked to it. Over 12,000 a year, over 65,000 since they set it up. They've returned over $1.4 billion to investors. Now, I have a small retirement account. It's pretty small. What can I say? But one day I got a check for $1,000 because apparently one of my funds had been attacked, from some form of fraud. And of that 1.5 billion, I got a check. And that's happening across the country because it works. So this office concept is really big. And so we're going to support that. Also, what Georgina said, it is international. Over 1,500 whistleblowers from UK have filed in the United States. We have some really good laws. And Georgina said we need to align the laws. That's absolutely true. But right now, UK whistleblowers can come to the United States, file anonymously and confidentially if they're blowing the whistle on a global corporation. So it's been working, and Georgina's group wants to help push that forward for a global response to corruption.
And Stephen, did the recent anti-money laundering bill that was passed, did that have something to do with what we're seeing today?
Well, absolutely. The money laundering bill, which was passed in the United States, I think will ultimately be the most important transnational anti-corruption law in the world. Because money laundering is transnational. All major corrupt officials use money laundering. You have to, just the nature of hiding your ill-gotten gains. And the law is transnational because money laundering moves from bank to bank to bank across lines, across countries. Now, we really hope, and I'm really going to push, that the UK joins aggressively in this effort. Because, as you may know, I represented the Danske Bank whistleblower. And that was 230 billion laundered from Russia and former Soviet republics into the West. Now, we've seen a $2 billion sanction now from the SEC and the US Department of Justice step forward. Denmark is picking up 500 million of those sanctions, and let's certainly hope they use those to increase their anti-corruption efforts. But guess what? The UK was the intermediary. Every illegal LLP that we've identified in that massive scandal was in the UK. We need the UK to join, to get the whistleblowers out, to join in these corruption efforts. Why are they on the sideline on this case? So that's what we're talking about in the UK. We need to strengthen their laws. They need a whistleblower office, and they need to align their law enforcement responses to those of other countries.
Well said, Stephen. And Georgina, do you have a response to that? I know you're making great inroads on what's happening in the UK.
Well, it's quite difficult because I'm not a politician. I'm an NGO and I run an NGO, and we're here using soft power. And how we do that, Jane, is we use the whistleblowers in a way that helps them to engage with the politicians and the regulators to make sure that the information that they have is passed forward. And of course, if we'd been around before 2014, we would have been better placed to help Howard. But things have developed, and we've learned from cases like Howard and Jonathan Taylor and many other whistleblowers that we have supported in order to ensure that somebody's listening. But I take the point Steve's making. The anti-money laundering response that the US has pushed forward is robust. And I have no doubt that there are people within the UK who are looking at it, perhaps enviously, and hoping that we develop the same. And probably in Russia, they're hoping we don't develop it. So let's be on the side, let's be on the side of the good guys. We are indeed allies across the pond, I think.
Yes.
But it's important for people of integrity to have somewhere that they can go to. And I think even the numbers that are going to the States, 1,500 alone last year, I think it was actually more from the UK, who are looking over there when they are seeing these serious crimes. They're not saying we're doing it for the money, because I haven't yet met anybody who said that. But what they are saying is, I'm looking at it for the protection that the Americans will afford me. In the UK, they're stuck in an employment tribunal, David versus Goliath. And in over 25 years since our law was passed, even in the cases where the employment tribunal has seen compelling evidence that serious crime or fraud or abuse of children, whatever it will be, has been happening, it's never been passed to the Crown Prosecution Service, to law enforcement, or to a regulator. That demonstrates that what we have is a very aspirational and well-intentioned piece of legislation, but it just hasn't worked. And it's driven wrongdoing. Well, in fact, it's allowed wrongdoing to thrive because people obviously don't care if they're not going to be in trouble for anything. But it's also driven whistleblowers to either walk away because they're frustrated or they can't afford the legal process, which is really expensive. People spend a lot more than they ever recover on legal fees. And of course, their reputation is damaged because of the publicity, the way it's reported by the UK courts. There are a whole range of different disincentives. Because I think what people are doing by looking to what's happening in America and how this particular week, Whistleblowing Awareness Week, will help, is to debunk some of these strange ideas that whistleblowers in the UK are different to whistleblowers anywhere else. This idea that they shouldn't be properly compensated when they are disadvantaged, when they experience losses. In my opinion, and it always has been my position, that's fundamentally wrong. Now, I'm not sure I'm on lines with your word reward, because again, I'm British, but whatever you call it, and it doesn't matter if you call it orange, people are not going to come forward if they don't have proper protection, if nobody's going to investigate and take action, if people aren't going to have to pay penalties in whatever way, shape or form for the wrongdoing they're responsible for or covering up, and ultimately for those losses that whistleblowers experience. Because while I have no doubt the legislation we are proposing will put an end to a huge amount of the detriment that whistleblowers experience in the UK, I am totally realistic about the fact that whistleblowers will still experience detriment, that their names will be leaked out. We've seen it very recently with high-profile cases, even in Westminster, where the first instinct has been, who is the whistleblower? Let's character assassinate the whistleblower. That indeed has an impact on them personally, perhaps psychologically or mentally, but equally on potential employment and future employment for them. Turning my face back towards the anti-money laundering legislation and the Dodd-Frank and other pieces of legislation that you have, I think because you have embedded very firmly in there a robust response to and an intolerance to the abuse of whistleblowers and the persecution of whistleblowers, that is the thing that will change the game for all of us and start to make this a global movement, setting standards around the world wherever crime, corruption and cover-ups are happening.
And Stephen, let me ask, I know that you've been so successful in the whistleblowing world because you work so closely with Congress, with politicians, with leaders in that area, in that realm. What do you think of this Whistleblower Week and Georgina's obviously successful ventures into bringing parliamentarian people over to her side?
Well, Georgina's doing it right. She's putting together a broad coalition making it nonpartisan, reaching out to all the different political parties as best as you can. And that's the formula for success. Focus on the contribution that whistleblowers can bring to the table in fighting corruption. Focus on the hardships they suffer and trying to remedy them, and build as broad a coalition as possible. That's what we've done in the United States, and it's worked. That's what she's trying to do there. Let's hope it works, because UK needs it. Just a couple other points. The other thing Georgina mentions is, and I just want to get into this, which is people blow the whistle to report fraud, corruption, and wrongdoing. They don't blow the whistle to have an employment case. That's just something that should never even happen. Mm-hmm. So by creating an office of the whistleblower that can funnel whistleblower concerns to law enforcement, and hopefully law enforcement will protect their identity, treat them as confidential informants, be professional, maybe you can avoid these employment cases, which is ultimately the goal. When we did Dodd-Frank, I'll never forget, I was talking to Senate Banking Committee, and I was talking about anti-retaliation, and it does have a good provision. But the guy from the Banking Committee was really smart. He said, Steve, if Wall Street knows who the whistleblower is, that person will be destroyed, period. So therefore, we're going to build into our law really strong confidentiality provisions and anonymity provisions. But those were predicated on the ability to send whistleblowers not to the Labor Department or to an employment tribunal, where it's always David versus Goliath, but to the law enforcement authorities that can put the gun to the head of the corrupt officials and force them to cry uncle. And the law enforcement authorities can say, you don't touch my witness.
Exactly. Well said. Well said. And Georgina, you have some heavy hitters from Parliament on your side that you have cultivated and are going to the mat for you.
Well, again, I think being British, I would say not on my side, but recognizing that the proposals that we put forward are stop laughing, Stephen. The proposals that we have
no, you keep saying forward, being British, because I'm up here.
We have used quiet persuasion, we've used soft power, we've literally put plenty of whistleblowers in front of them in whistleblower cases, setting out clearly what people whistleblew about, what the response to that was by the relevant authorities who should have taken action, and ultimately the impact that that has had on people, because too many people are facing severe hardships. Other people these days, more and more frequently, are facing allegations by the police. They're being referred to the police by these pretty aggressive organizations who don't want to be found out. And because our system is somewhat bonkers, the police seem to have a lot of energy to be able to chase whistleblowers, but they don't seem to have the resource or energy or enthusiasm to go after those who are actually doing wrongdoing, including amongst their own ranks, I have to say. But you're absolutely right, Steve. You raised such a very important point. Whistleblowing is not an employment issue, and that's going to be one of our real themes of this entire week. And we're putting that to the Prime Minister, we're putting it to members of government itself, and we will be meeting with one of the ministers from the business secretary, I was going to say secretary, but of course it's not, the business department, the Department for Business. And we're really pleased that they're engaging with us on a professional level. This isn't about a campaign and banging the table, wearing sackcloth and ashes. It's about well-constructed professional arguments. And we're prepared to defend them and concede where we may have not got it right. But it's about round the table. And you say about the Titans, Jane, anyone who goes into politics, they're all open to scrutiny, but fundamentally they have to have some steel running through them to put up with all of the things that are thrown at them and to grasp so many very complicated issues. So frankly, my respect goes out to them. And this whole week, getting this together and getting support from Parliament to be able to run it in that building signals something very positive, not just to the UK, but around the world, that Britain is putting its, really planting its flag in this again. They haven't decided what they're doing, but there is a review underway. And I'm really optimistic that this week is going to form a good basis for their review of whistleblowing legislation. And when they see so many whistleblowers and they hear from so many regulators and other professionals, including from across the pond and around the world, that they will recognise that it's time to set aside something that was incredibly well intentioned, the Public Interest Disclosure Act, but replace it and have something that really does the job. Because I think what we've put forward will help the Americans and people like yourself, Steve, who's campaigning over there, to plug some of the gaps that you've got, because you've got some regulatory capture, you've got some gaps between them. And of course, Jane, you come from what we call the public sector. And I think that the way that your public sector whistleblowers are treated in the US, you're not setting us a standard there. We're setting out, I think, to be able to demonstrate that all whistleblowers need to be treated fairly, whether they're workers, whether they're civilians, whoever they are. Everybody needs this right. It should be a fundamental human right to be protected against retaliation, to be free to speak up, and for people who have take the pay to do the job, to investigate and take action that's appropriate. Whistleblowers don't need to be in the spotlight. They are an intelligence source that should be respected. They're a citizen's army.
Well said. Well said. And Stephen, do you want to address that?
Sure. So just a couple points is, we went through something similar for corporate whistleblowers. We had the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, which I worked extensively on, and it was anti-retaliation only. It did not establish a whistleblower office. It had no mechanism to refer whistleblower complaints to the appropriate law enforcement authorities, no anonymity, no confidentiality, no prohibition on NDAs. So many of the types of things you see in the current English law. And we learned our lessons and we upgraded in Dodd-Frank, looking at how that law didn't work and what type of fixes were needed to get a really good corporate whistleblower law, which we now have, and growing because of the success of the securities law. We're seeing it unfold in other areas, most recently money laundering. So I think the UK is in some ways in the same spot. They passed at the time what was considered a pretty good anti-retaliation law. At the time, it was the best such law in all of Europe. Over time, they've seen its problems. They're also able to learn from what the United States has done and how we fix some of these problems. And let's hope that now this push from Whistleblowers UK, which is really following some of the basic rules of bipartisanship, pointing out the contributions that whistleblowers can make, and push the UK to the next level. They need to be there because corruption is a big deal. One thing we've learned about the war in Ukraine is there was billions and billions and billions of dollars of corrupt Russian money floating around the international financial system. It was bribing up politicians. It was circulating back into Russia and former Soviet republics to bribe people, to really fuel this very undemocratic, authoritarian, corrupt process. So, and it's just like, all of these tyrants need money. And we see that they've used the Western systems. They've used American banks, British banks, European banks. And now we've seen this. We've learned the danger of having corruption in the international financial systems. So we need to rally up.
And I think it's incredible that you two are going to get together. You have this whistleblower week coming up. And Georgina, we have to applaud you, whistleblowers all over the world, for putting this together. I wish I was a fly in the room when you and Stephen get together and discuss how to change the world, which is what you're doing. You two are changing the world. That's a heavy responsibility, isn't it?
I think it is, but I'm humbled by the fact that people have put so much trust in me. And that includes our politicians and the regulators, law enforcement, and of course, the whistleblowers who have trusted Whistleblowers UK with their confidence. And there are more people on side with this than there are against it. And I think once we get over this hump, and it is a bit of a hump, about the terminology around rewards and who funds organisations, then we will be really pushing forward with this. We'll be moving forward, and it's to everybody's benefit. But most importantly, it's to the benefit of our children and the current younger people who are going to really benefit from this, and making sure that it isn't a piece of legislation that's ambitious, but it's one that's purposeful, that will continue to be purposeful, that will be properly monitored and evaluated, updated, and the lessons learned from the past, from all over the world, will be put to good use. And you have done a lot of work over there, and so have a number of other countries who've adopted similar programs and processes. I'm really, as I said, I'm optimistic. Hopeful is a word I no longer use. It's now about optimism. It's about being clear-minded. There is some room for some compromise, and I'm pretty certain that we won't get everything in one go. But what I am really certain of is we're going to get something. We're going to get something soon, and it's going to make a huge difference to the way that people think about whistleblowing, think about whistleblowers, and it's going to start to transform the culture. We're going to stop using prerogative terms, snitches and grasses and all of that kind of thing. And we're going to start thinking of whistleblowers as an asset. I've used the term before and I've stolen it from other people, the board's best friend, because they need to be the board's best friend. The board has to be saying, why am I not hearing this? Why are we not getting any of these reports? Putting it on everybody's agenda, be it the public or the private sector. But talking back to that, and if I can circle back to the hump, we have the second largest sort of group of employees in the world, public sector, which is in our brilliant NHS. And what the conversation needs to be in the UK is our financial services area is responsible for the largest chunk of the 190 billion a year that's lost to fraud. Mm-hmm. Now, some of that is linked to the companies that sell into our brilliant NHS. And we have got to stop putting rose-coloured glasses on. We've got to take them off. We've got to look at the aspects of the NHS which is supplied by industries and organisations who might be involved in corrupt practices. And then when we start recovering that money, that's when our NHS and other public service, education, transport, infrastructure can start to thrive again. Therefore, I'm really hoping that having the generosity of Stephen and other organisations that are coming over and they're supporting us, it will demonstrate to government that people are prepared to invest their time in this, their energy, because they can see the knock-on for their communities and their countries of positive benefits, not just for now, but for the future.
Well said, well said. And we're going to give Stephen the last word, but before we do, I'd like to mention, Georgina, that if I was head of parliament, I'd take that multi-million-dollar penthouse that Putin's daughter owns over there in London and give it to Whistleblowers UK as their headquarters. Stephen, you get the last word. I'm very excited that you're going to go over there. I just wish I could be there. Is there any way we can participate via Zoom or anything?
Well, I'm sure there is, and let's try to organize that at the end as best we can. My law partner and the General Counsel of National Whistleblower Center, Dave Calpino, is joining me, and he actually has a cell phone. He can work things far better than I.
You don't need to, because we've got it all sorted. We have got Zoom links to a lot of the events, so that's brilliant.
Perfect.
And where can it be accessed, Georgina?
We're going to put it all out, Jane. What we've organised through our administration for people who register, who can't attend in person. It won't be all of the sessions, but it will be a large number of them, and they can register, get it. They'll then be sent a link, and again, it's no good asking me because I'm not technical at all, but I know it's happening in the background. My team, before you said give Steve the last word, please can I just give a big shout out to my team, to all of our associate members, to the parliamentarians, and to everybody around the fringes, including the journalists who have been rooting for us and so positive about what we're trying to achieve. And I think the real thanks is to them, and that demonstrates the power of what we're doing and how important it is. Thanks to everybody.
And the link is on your website, Whistleblowers UK. I've signed
registration.
up.
The registration form is all on there, Jane. Yes.
Stephen, take us home.
My last word is, and first off, Whistleblowers UK is doing a fantastic job, and I'm honored to have been invited to assist and go over and share some of the lessons from the US. And maybe Win can put that live on its own channels and really see what it can do to integrate. But I think Georgina's message that corruption and fraud is international, that we need to align programs, there needs to be international cooperation, and is really where it's at. It is international, and many of the countries that suffer the most from the corruption are the poorest, developing nations, people in authoritarian regimes that really could use some help. So let's hope it all works out. And thank you, Jane. Thank you. Your podcast is wonderful. Everyone should be listening to it, and I'm really happy to be on it. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you, Stephen Kohn and Georgina Halford-Hall, the two twin titans of the whistleblowing world. Thank you for appearing today on Whistleblower of the Week by Whistleblower Network News.
Thank you so much, Jane. Thank you. See you soon. Thank you, Steve.
Bye-bye.
Bye.